When I see a mountain, I see something that has weathered the storm. I see resilience. I see something that is stoic. I see patience. And these are elements that I feed into my life. So when I'm busy commanding my driver to switch off the music, I try and remember where I started. You see, what I do involves guiding governments in East and West Africa on how they can improve their research. I work with ministers in higher education and science and technology in Eastern African countries, and also West African countries, and the occasional African president. So it's easy for me to tell them, this is what you need to do to improve the quality of your research, and this is where you're failing. And that polite, you are doing so well, young lady, from a man of such power is always a moment of utter humility. And it's something that you try and figure out, how did I get to this point? And I remember how I started. So at 16, finished high school. I still had a brick wall for a chest. Yes, very true. And the first thing I did was tell my mom that I wanted to work. And by then, she worked for the Delamere Estates. So she expected her 16-year-old to have some sense and say, fine, I would like to work in the office. No, I said I want to work in the farm. So if you're familiar with the Delamere Estates, they have hectares upon hectares of farmland which is used for horticultural produce. And they employ women as laborers to work in that farm. And what they plant is mostly French beans. So here I was at 16, walking 5 kilometers every morning from home to the Lord Delamere Estates farm to pick French beans. And that was my first experience with poverty. Because every morning, you have to pick up your sack, be at the farm by 7 a.m., pick up your sack, go to the farm, pick your beans, go back to the farm house, have it weighed, sorted. You will pack the beans that you've collected, and then they are put in the lorry and taken to the cooler in Nairobi for export. Now, the company that used to work with us was VegPro. These days, I'm in the airport at least 4 times a month. And every time I'm at the airport, I pass the VegPro company. And I'm like, yes. I did pick beans and put them in that truck. But the one thing that shocked me about working that early in my life was seeing poverty at that age. The Lord Delamere Estates only employed women. And for good reason. No offense, men, but I saw the dark side of men at a very early age. I saw 3 generations of women picking beans so that they could maximize the amount of money they could get home. So you have a grandmother, her daughter, and her granddaughter picking French beans. And every week when we got paid, their husbands, either drunk or hungover, would be waiting for the money that they have already accumulated. Another time, one of the ladies who was picking French beans delivered in the farm. And in order not to miss that day's pay, what she did was swaddle the baby and continue picking French beans. That scared me so much that I left my basket and went home. Of course, I was fined. You don't leave your basket of beans in the farm. But that was my first lesson in promising myself never to be financially vulnerable. I never wanted to put myself in a situation whereby I have to choose work over my life. And with time, I had saved enough money, and being the headstrong, firstborn daughter that I am, and with failing relationships at home, at 19, picked up my tin suitcase. If those of you remember the tin suitcases that we used in boarding school, that was, yes, my sanduku, picked it up, got into a matatu with my savings, came to Nairobi. I had made sure I'd gotten myself admitted into college. Now, I hadn't thought through it very well because I got to Nairobi at about 8 p.m. And this was in 99, and it wasn't easy to get a matatu from the bus station to college. So there I was with my tin suitcase, and I slept in Machakos bus stop. I have a driver right now. I passed Machakos bus stop, I'm like, I'm not going through that again. But I know how it feels like to sleep in a matatu, because you cannot leave that night. It is risky to go to school. So first thing in the morning, I got a number 58, I got a mkokoteni, put my suitcase in it, got to the 58 stage, then went to school. But 1 month later, my fear of being financially independent kicked in. I needed to pay for my school fees. So the first thing I did was knock on every single media door looking for a job, because I was in media school. And of course, you're tired, you have dusty shoes, you're dark because you've been in the sun. Most of the watchmen will not allow you into the building. It's surprising these days they're quick to carry my handbag and laptop. But at that point, they wouldn't want to look at you. The same buildings that I was struggling to get into. Then finally, one media house employed me. And I told them on condition that I am allowed to go to school between 8 to 5, and beyond that, I'm working at the media house. And this was the People Daily. Funny enough, with all the challenges that the People Daily had, they were keen to make sure that I was in school and was also continuing with my media career. So I finished school, passed, and then I got into the media sphere. And during this whole period, a lot of things were happening on the personal front. I got into a relationship, and it wasn't the best kind of relationship. It was quite abusive. It was physically abusive. I was in it for 4 years. And the sad thing about being in a physically abusive relationship is that you don't quite know that you are in it until when you come out of it. It took me leaving the country and working in Tanzania, still in my media capacity, for me to figure it out that I was in a physically abusive relationship. Please note, at that point, I had survived being put in hospital, being in ICU for 1 week, still going back, having a few miscarriages, still going back. But when I came out of it and enough was enough, I was in another country. At that point, I was working with the Ministry of Community Health, and I was setting up a publishing house, still in my media capacity. And Tanzania decided to kick out Kenyans. So here I was at 26, jobless and homeless. And I had to come back to Kenya. And I slept on my friend's couch for a year, jobless and homeless. And it was during that period that I sat down and started creating a business proposal for the work I am currently doing. Just like Amina, guiding governments Guiding governments on how they can improve their research and higher education was not in my pipeline. I was trained to be in the media. And when I wrote that proposal, one of my biggest challenges was, how was I going to make it work? And I started looking for partners. So here I was at 26, homeless, jobless, and writing a proposal and thinking that I want the University of Nairobi to be my business partner. And interestingly enough, if you have the confidence of the gods, trust me, when you're desperate, you will pull that confidence. I went to the University of Nairobi, and 10 years later, they've been my business partner. So when I go to governments, various governments, I also come in the name of the university. I also come in the name of this government. And it is because of that that I also got a position with one of the multinationals at the same capacity. But what has that got to do with climbing mountains? I mentioned that climbing a mountain is an element of being resilient, has elements of being resolute, of being stoic. When I've gone through all these painful relationships and still trying again, and you're seeing them falling, and failing in your face, and you do a lot of navel gazing. You do a lot of belittling of yourself and questioning, what decisions have I made in life to reach in such a situation? One of the things I realized was I needed to take control of my life. It is easy to have a knee-jerk reaction on survival skills if you need to make money. But when it comes to your social life, you really need to take full control of it. And after surviving the physically abusive relationship and getting into other relationships that were also not very healthy, to be precise, quite toxic, it took some time for me to sit down and question, how is it that I got into such a situation? And then I said, let me climb a mountain. Maybe I might get some answers. First of all, I take pride in the fact that I'm physically fit. That is why I said, I'll climb a mountain, because this is not something you just do. And I will pass it to you and ask, how many of you have climbed a mountain? Anything above 2,000 meters is a mountain. Okay? That is good. All right? And what are some of the experiences that you felt when you're climbing that mountain? I will never do this again. What else have you felt? Why did I do this? Is this the best decision? Okay? The reason why I thought of that is, well, the mountain is there. It signifies some of the things that I've been going through. It signifies resilience. So let's see if I can go through that mountain and understand why I've been going through all these messy relationships. So I was quite excited, buying the equipment and everything. And by the time we were ready, and I wasn't smart, to be honest, I hadn't thought this through very well. Instead of thinking of the small mountains, I started with the world summit. Okay, that's Kilimanjaro, Mt Kilimanjaro. Then I went backwards to the other mountains. Okay, so the interesting thing was that as we were preparing, the next thing I knew is that we're at base camp, because everything is a rush. You're now on adrenaline high. So we're at base camp, and that's where we met there. We met the guide. And my guide told me that I'm your boss. Please note, I have survived a whole lot of messes before. The last thing I needed to hear was somebody tell me that he's my boss. And just like what Tanya was saying, that if you know you're independent, and that is at the back of your mind, that can be also your downfall. So the first thing that was going through my mind was that, how can you tell me you're my boss? On what grounds are you my boss? But he was right. He has climbed that mountain too many times to count. And he told me something that was quite memorable. Kilimanjaro is beautiful, but she will break you if you don't respect her. So you'll have to listen to every single thing that I tell you. Otherwise, you will never reach the top. So this is the experience I went through when I was climbing the mountain. Lack of breath. And I love talking. And I realized one thing. In order to breathe, I need to be quiet. And if you're quiet, the only thing you can do is reflect on what you've been going through. And this is 7 days of silence. That was rough. Okay? So I'm looking at myself and questioning, okay, why have I gotten to this situation? I was very critical with myself. But then the other scary thing about climbing a mountain is that it really messes with your physiology. You may not like this, but you're going to get headaches. You're going to have loose bowel movements. You're going to be throwing up because of the altitude sickness that you'll be facing. And it is very humiliating. It brings out either the best in you or the worst in you. You'll be ready to be assisted, or you're ready to help someone, because you're all at the same level. Whether you're at the pinnacle in your career or nowhere, when you're climbing that mountain, you're all at the same level. You're all not going to bathe for 7 days. Because if you bathe, you lose body warmth. You need to contain your body warmth. And that is very important when climbing mountains. So when we had climbed all when we had passed all the major huts, this was the easiest route. That was the first time I climbed Kilimanjaro. So when we had passed all the major huts, on the last hut, I saw the three peaks that I had to pass through. The Gilman's Point, Stella Point, and Uhuru Peak. Now, Gilman's Point, just for reference, Gilman's Point is higher than Point Lenana on Mount Kenya. And that is the first peak on Kilimanjaro. And at that point, after a lot of self-reflection and being honest with the mistakes that I had made, accepting that in relationships as well, it takes two people for it to make it work or fail, no matter how painful or brutal it ends. And also, with some sheer humility, I had started appreciating the fact that the people who would come into your life are not necessarily the most educated, who would help you as well, okay? So in this case, my tour guide, I don't think he finished primary school, but he had climbed Kilimanjaro so many times, so he knew what he was talking about. So I was slowly coming to accept that help will come from the most interesting corners, not what you expect. So when we were waiting to summit, the tour guide asked me again, "Are you sure you're ready to do this?" I had reached this far. I'd already done a lot of self-reflection, and I said, what is the worst that could happen? Still not thinking through my decisions, because all I wanted to do was get it over and done with, in the assumption that it's going to help me heal with what I'm going through. I was like, fine, let's do this. I'm ready. It was rough. Because the first 100 meters, getting into Gilman's Point, I couldn't breathe. He was dragging me every single time. He carried my bag, and he kept on asking me, "You sure you want to go? You're sure you don't want to go back?" I was like, no, let's continue. And every time I closed my eyes, he would hit me, because if you close your eyes, you pass out and then you go down. By 6 a.m., because we started summiting at about 11 p.m., by 6 a.m., we were already on Gilman's Point. By 7:30, I had passed Stella Point, and I'd also reached Uhuru Peak. So getting on Uhuru Peak, I got on Uhuru Peak on my birthday. So when I got there, I saw there were people who were jubilating. I made snow angels. Fortunately, there was snow during that time. There were people jubilating. I was looking at my tour guide, and he was very calm. And I had some newfound respect for him, and also for myself, in the sense that, number one, help, as I said earlier on, comes from the least expected places. Learn to accept help from somebody who is not in the same station like you. And also, when it comes to relationships, I learned that you need to hold yourself accountable for the decisions that you make within that relationship. You need to be critically honest with yourself, no matter how painful that relationship is. Yeah? You need to be critically honest with yourself and accept the challenges that maybe you contributed to the failure of that relationship. So I have climbed 11 mountains since then. I have summited Kilimanjaro twice. Yeah? And I have climbed from the Drakensberg in Southern Africa to Sinai. I've climbed mountains in the US, and I'm in the process of climbing Mount Erebus. It is the highest point in Russia, just after the Olympics. Is it the Olympics? Yes, the World Cup, after the World Cup. So that is my plan. And definitely it's something I'm going to do in the summer. And it's an easy climb. So ladies, and gents, when you're climbing a mountain, just know this. You might see it as a tough experience, but do know this. We do climb mountains in our everyday life with the challenges that we face. Yeah? Yeah. And we fail to see that these are everyday challenges. But the same discipline that I have used in climbing a mountain, being resilient, being patient, learning to accept help, these are the same things that will actually help you in climbing your everyday mountains. And I thank you for listening to me.